Hi, Jess here from the Intelligent Hypnotist, and today we're going to look at the video that I posted a few days ago, an example of the dreaming arm and Ericksonian hypnotic approaches to teeth grinding. And this was a demo that I had done during a live hypnotherapy training class, and I wanted to take some time today and go through the different components so you have a better understanding of what I'm doing, where, and why. So let's go ahead and just jump in. What would you like to work through?
So I grind my teeth pretty bad, definitely at night because I can feel it in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I also catch myself during the day, jaw clenched.
When was the last time you noticed this?
This morning.
This morning when you woke up.
Mm.
And how were you feeling last night when you went to bed?
Fine. Yeah.
And can you think of, or can you recall a time when you noticed your clenched jaw in the waking world?
Yeah.
Okay, when was that?
At work.
This week, last week?
I guess on Friday.
Okay, on Friday. So what's happening on Friday?
I was reading through this report that we were making edits, and I just noticed like my jaw is clenched. You know, I don't know how long it was clenched for, but it certainly was. And then when I noticed it, I'd try and relax it, but.
And when your jaw was clenched, how was the rest of you feeling?
I was stressed.
Okay. That's kind of what I suspected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we begin this session by getting a specific context. Now, typically with tooth grinding, this happens when we sleep, and it's a fair enough guess that it's stress-related. However, in the type of approach that I take, it's important to begin to light up the neural networks associated with the behavior at the beginning of the session so that there's something to tie the resources to. So I wasn't really asking these questions to necessarily get information from the client, but to help him associate into the experience, which he does quite easily. You can hear his transition from past tense to present tense language. And when I eventually ask him about his state, not only does he say tense, but you can hear it in the way that he says it. So as far as I'm concerned, the neural network is lit up and we can continue. And if you could be any way different, how do you want to be?
I guess happy.
Happy. So this is a lot bigger than the jaw?
Yeah.
So I'll pause it there for a second, and there's a couple of key points that I'd like to highlight. The first is that I'm interested primarily in the client's desired outcomes. I'm not going to suggest what the best states are or resolution is to this problem because I really hold firm that the client unconsciously, definitely, and very often consciously knows a lot more about their specific problem than I do. So I want the client to choose what their desired outcome state is. And once they have the desired outcome state, the behavioral change will follow suit. The other thing about this particular session is I know that this client, he's in the process of a massive life transition. He's moving across the world. He's leaving his job. Part of the stress that he was experiencing at the time was work-related, which meant that it was transient because of this big move coming up. And this idea of happiness, this was a recurring theme for him. And this is really about making a much larger change. So, of course, when I mention that this is about something much bigger, both he and I know it, but it's a pace, and his unconscious mind appreciated it. You could see it from the unconscious head nod. You could hear it through the change in breathing. And, of course, the slight smile or a little bit of laughter. And what needs to happen in the jaw in order for you to be happy? Or at least to contribute to that happiness?
Just relax it.
Just relax. Yeah, because relaxed people tend to be a bit happier. Notice here that I don't talk about the jaw's relaxation. I make a comment about people being relaxed. Throughout this session, I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the idea of jaw relaxation versus being relaxed as a person. So I'm going to be confusing logical levels between identity and behavior. I'm also confusing the jaw versus the rest of him because I want to indirectly suggest to him that there is a very real mind-body connection, that the jaw isn't this separate thing doing something at night out of his control, but it's a part of the larger system that is him. So throughout the session, you'll hear this mixing back and forth between identity and behavior, or between jaw and entire person.
And I know that, especially in work, that there are things that need to change. So I'm going to have to do an ecology check here.
This ecology check is very important for two reasons. The first is that this particular client responds well to the idea of a propulsion system, so having negative motivation and positive motivation to make a life change. So we want to make sure that if we take away the jaw clenching, that he's not going to change his mind and stagnate and stay in an environment or a situation where he really isn't happy. So that's part one. We want to be sure that it's ecological, that the jaw clenching isn't needed for him to remain motivated to continue with his life change. The second reason is that this behavior obviously has a positive intention behind it. Whether that positive intention is to manage stress or the positive intention is to help him in his transition, or it has some other positive intention. And I want to be sure that when we make this change, that positive intention, especially if it's to help him continue to move on and pursue his dreams, that if we take it away, that there is something else to help him achieve that positive intention. As we get later in this demo, we will be directly working with the positive intention, but we're not there yet. Right now, I'm only calibrating for the unconscious agreement that yes, we're ready for a change. And we'll see that in just a minute.
I want you to check with all of you, your conscious mind and your unconscious mind, and be really clear on whether or not it's going to be useful to make this change, or is the clenching, is the unhappiness, is this motivation to get out of there?
You say that again?
That's right. So check in with yourself, and is it appropriate, given that you want to make a career change, is it appropriate to install this happiness in the jaw and in your current life?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, fantastic.
And you can notice his conscious and unconscious congruence there. It's not just in the words, but it's in the unconscious head nod, the slight shift in how he was sitting. So these are the things that we're tracking for. We're always having a two-level conversation. There's the conscious conversation, which is embodied in the words, and then we're always tracking the unconscious responses, breathing, facial expressions, tonality, tempo, pauses, and the rest of the physiology.
So you just put your hands on your lap. And he's like, I'm ready to go to trance. So I know you're a fantastic hypnotist, which means you can just close your eyes. And, you know, Milton Erickson, with his grumbly voice, had all sorts of different ways of inducing trance. And it doesn't really matter, though, how you go into trance.
So I'm going to stop it right here for a moment because I would like to talk a little bit about the use of embedded suggestions. You'll find embedded suggestions or embedded commands throughout this demo and a lot of the videos of client work that I've posted. I happen to personally love them. I find that they're an excellent way to begin to precede ideas with the unconscious and also to give very direct suggestions in a way that's wrapped nicely for the conscious mind as well. And the way that you'll be able to pick out the embedded suggestions is that you'll hear a downward inflection. This is command toned down in the English language. And often I'll deliver it with a tiny pause directly before the embedded suggestion and directly after so that it's marked out for the unconscious mind. Now, it may sound obvious, especially if you start tracking for the embedded suggestions. It'll begin to sound obvious to your conscious mind. However, when you're in the position of a client and you're caught up in the experience that you're having and all of the information that's coming in, your conscious mind isn't tracking for them. And even if the client consciously picks up on some of the embedded suggestions, that's absolutely fine. If you're using it early on, the chances are that the client, if they pick it up, will just either follow the suggestion or at least consciously gloss over and continue on in the discussion. If you're at this point within a session and you're doing something that's more overtly hypnotic, then it doesn't really matter as long as you have compliance and rapport, whether the suggestion is embedded and it flies on a conscious radar or the conscious mind catches on. It still works either way. As I mentioned, I like to use embedded suggestions. My unconscious mind tends to allow them to flow out without realizing it when working with clients. And I would suggest that if you'd like to get really good at embedded suggestions, the way to do it is just that. To set the intention and allow your unconscious mind to do it. If you try to do embedded suggestions consciously, it tends to get really clunky, and we spend too much of our bandwidth trying to track that instead of paying attention to the client in front of us. So once you learn how to deliver embedded suggestions easily, then you just set the intention and allow your unconscious mind to do the work.
As long as you begin to get a sense of that, an experience of that. And people have trance starting in many different parts of the body. Some people feel it in their eyes first, others in their breathing, others in their hands. Where does trance start for you?
In this part of the induction, I'm talking about how other people experience trance. Well, what that ends up doing is inviting him to compare his experience with what I'm saying about other people. So it's an indirect suggestion for him to experience the things that I'm suggesting. More importantly, what this allows me to do is it allows me to directionalize his attention and begin to move his attention to different aspects of the experience. Move from the hands to the breathing to the head. The client is allowing me to really narrow in what he's paying attention to in that moment. And remember that having attention is an important component of the hypnotic experience. Right where I stopped this, I had asked him what he thought his experience would be. And this is a test for compliance, because while I can see that he is having an inner experience, I want to make sure that he is following along. So when I ask him about his experience, I'm testing to make sure that he is choosing and following through the experience I've set up. And I also set him up into a bind here because whatever option he chooses is going to be right, which means that he's going into trance. So once he verbally commits to whichever aspect of the experience he's having, then we're really good to go, because in all of the experiences that I directed his attention through, any one of those can be utilized as a hypnotic phenomena, as we'll see in this demo. So I already know that we are comfortably far along in the trance experience and trance induction, and now it becomes a question of how and what to utilize to create the therapeutic experience. And we'll continue on.
Around my eyes or breathing.
Around your eyes or your breathing. So sometimes eyes, sometimes breathing?
Mm-hmm.
Which one is it going to be now?
Breathing.
Breathing, that's right. And as that happens, there's going to be times where I'm talking to you, and there's going to be times where I'm talking over here, and you'll know when this message is for you, and when it's less important to be tracking.
So when the client answered my question, he gave two possible answers. It's sometimes one experience, sometimes another experience. Even though you can see and hear that he's in trance at this point, he's still not completely committing. So I gently invite him to commit to one of those experiences, which indicates the trance is developing. So in this, it was fairly easy. When I asked him, he said it was his breathing. There might be times, if you use this with some clients, where they say, I don't know. And that's a wonderful opportunity, because you can hypnotically use I don't know to deepen the trance, and you can wrap in all sorts of implications around not knowing and still experiencing, around not knowing being the precursor to learning, confusion precedes growth, and so on. It doesn't really matter how the client answers, as long as you know how to utilize it. And in most cases, the client will commit to one or the other. In this case, it just took a little bit more gentle questioning and asking him to choose. Once he chose the breathing, of course, that indicates that he's consciously and unconsciously moving along in the process. Now, I also just take a moment to give him an experience of when I'm speaking to him versus when I'm speaking to the audience. And it's simply because this was in the context of a class, and there may have been times where I wanted to break away from the demo in order to address an issue with the class or something I was observing or something that came up. So I did this very indirectly just by using the location of my voice to let him know when the suggestions were for him and when there wasn't really a need to pay attention, when the suggestions and the ideas were for the audience.
And as you continue to breathe, I'm going to invite everyone to kind of move over here. And if you can't hear, to move closer. That's it. Because as you're breathing, it continues to create trance now. I'd like you to become aware of the sensations in your hands. For example, one hand could be warmer and the other hand cooler. And the easiest way to tell the difference is to notice in which hand you're paying more attention to the feeling between your palm and the top of your leg, that warmth, and in which hand you're noticing the flow of air over the top of the hand. Which hand for you is warmer right now?
Right.
Your right hand.
So this is one of my preferred inductions / deepeners to use if I know I'm going to be setting up hand levitation, catalepsy, anything like that. And the idea is that you create two different types of experiences between the hands. And if this were at the beginning of an induction, I may have gone for an easier experience first instead of the difference in temperature. I may have gone for heaviness versus lightness, relaxation versus comfort, asking the client to make those distinctions, which heaviness versus lightness is a much easier distinction to make. Relaxation versus comfort, that's an interesting one because it doesn't matter which way the client goes. It's really saying that pretty much the hands are the same. However, they will make a distinction between the two, which is interesting in and of itself and a topic for another video. In this case, because we were already well into the trance experience, I didn't need to do that. I went right for the difference in temperature. If you ask a client or anyone you're doing a hypnotic induction with to find the difference in temperature between two hands, they have to go inside. Because for them to externally answer, the answer is going to be, well, they're the same. If you set it up by giving a reference experience, telling the client where to send their awareness to find the difference, the client will find the difference. And this in of itself is very hypnotic. In this case, it was feeling the difference between the heat between the palm of his hand and the leg it was resting on versus noticing the flow of air over the top of the hand. Either way, it doesn't matter which hand's warmer, which hand's cooler. You can use either. What we're simply doing here is just inviting the client to notice the difference, and this will deepen the trance. This also gets the client comfortable with the idea of having one experience in one hand and a very different type of experience in the other, which will be the case when doing arm levitation and catalepsy.
That's right. That hand left warmer right now compared to that other one over there having a different experience. Because I know you're here to make a change. And I'd like for you to know that all you are is changing. And while you've consciously had thoughts about making this change, it's really your unconscious mind that's in charge of creating this change for you. Because it's your unconscious mind that knows a lot more about happiness than your conscious mind does. And happiness can take all different forms.
So I'll pause it here for a moment again. Now, in this part, I'm introducing some important pre-frames for the piece of change work. Now, if this were a one-on-one client session and he was a new client, then I would have taken far more time in the pre-talk to talk about ideas like all you are is changing. Because everything changes, you cannot possibly stay the same. I would probably give some reference examples of how all you are is changing, like the fact that who you were at an atomic level a year ago is almost completely different from who you are now. you cannot help but change. And I would, with a new client, also reinforce that idea within trance. Because this is in a class setting, this is a student, he's already had all of these pre-frames extensively, so there was really no need to bring it up consciously again. I brought it up here simply to pre-frame the experience he was about to go into. And the same is true for also the idea that it's the unconscious mind that knows how to create the change. And this comes from the presupposition that Erickson held, that the conscious mind need not be always made conscious of what the unconscious mind is doing. And it's also the idea that the unconscious mind makes decisions first, the unconscious mind takes action first. And it is a half a second delay between the unconscious making a decision and conscious recognition. So I'm setting this up to communicate to him that this is really the space for his unconscious to make the change, and it's his unconscious mind that I'm primarily interested in having this discussion with.
Sometimes we're happy because our environment supports it. But that's kind of the cheap happiness. It doesn't last. So it's dependent on the outside. Versus the happiness that you can self-generate now, which is more sustainable, more lasting.
So a big part of this client's change work and transformation throughout this training had to do with finding happiness inside. There were lots of different contexts and situations that he wasn't happy in and wasn't happy with, and he was looking towards the outside to create happiness. So I'm indirectly, with this little segment here, inviting him to be at cause for his happiness. And this theme of cheap happiness versus the happiness that's sustaining, that comes from inside, I'm going to be repeating over and over and over again, because I want him to begin to consider that regardless of the environment he finds himself in, he has a choice. He can create happiness, or he can have this cheap type of happiness that's solely dependent on what's happening around him. We're more interested in the happiness that is self-generating because it's more resilient, it's more lasting, it's more enduring, and it's going to give him, in the long run, greater scope of choice in terms of the decisions he makes in life. So this is a really important learning, and it's something that I really reinforce with a lot of my clients who are coming for therapeutic change, and it's this idea that you have to be at cause for your own states. The environment and other people don't make you feel things. It's something inside that reacts to what's happening internally that creates the emotional state. If you can control what's happening inside, if you can generate the states that are ideal for you, then what's happening externally becomes less significant, because how you engage with what's happening externally becomes way more resourceful.
Because if you were to project yourself a year, 2 years, or 3 years into the future, when you've had that relaxed jaw and you are happy, which comes from inside, you can become aware of who you're being as a person after you've practiced this happiness for so long. Who are you being as a person when you've practiced this happiness for so long?
Smiling.
That's right. Smiling.
Projecting into the future and asking a client who they're being or how are they being elicits what John Overdorf calls end state energy. This is the enduring state that is sustainable in a client's neurology. A lot of times when clients come in, they ask for big states like confidence. And even happiness can be a high energy state depending on how it's framed. And it's important to get to the enduring state that's under that, because these highly energetic states are not sustainable in our physiology in the long run. We have to have some downtime, if you will. So we want a state that is going to be positive and resourceful and sustaining. And often when you ask this question, you typically get an answer that is the equivalent of a value. In this case, we don't. It's very interesting. In this case, his response is smiling. And that's interesting because Here he is now confusing logical levels between behaviors and identity or behaviors and values. And I'm not completely sure what he means by this. However, as we continue on, it does evolve and develop, so it doesn't really matter what the word is the client says, as long as they're congruent as they say it, meaning their physiology is symmetrical, as we can see here in this demo, it certainly is, and the energy behind what's being said matches. Now, if you're eliciting this in trance, you're not going to get big energy responses. If you're doing this more conversationally, more in an uptime trance versus this downtime, more Ericksonian approach, then you might get more energy involved in this. However, when someone's in trance, as we know, there is an inhibition when it comes to speech. It's a little bit harder, as was the case here, and overall the energy is far more subdued. So we're mainly looking at this point for symmetry in the physiology, making sure that there's no major shifts that would make one curious about whether or not smiling would work. As I mentioned, as we see here though, it's perfectly fine. To me, it doesn't matter the word that's used as long as the meaning and energy are congruent for the person.
And you can just be aware of the things that you believe about yourself when you're smiling and happy, and how it feels in your body. Because as your conscious mind does that, I'd like for your unconscious mind now to begin a process of transformation.
So right there, that gentle tap on the hand as I say, you're unconscious. This is another indirect suggestion, and this suggestion is specifically preceding the idea that the unconscious mind is going to be in control of that hand, or the unconscious mind is going to be in that hand in a few moments. I don't need to directly say it. This is more of a subtle kinesthetic suggestion. The bonus to this is that if the client is consciously aware of that, then they might get really curious as to what does it mean? Why was there that gentle tap with the unconscious? Some clients will just shrug it off, and other clients will get really, really fascinated and curious, which is great because those are really resourceful trances to be in.
And it can choose which hand is right to create this experience. And you'll know because you'll begin to get a sensation. Some people describe it as a lightness. Others as a slight twitch. But you can know that you've laid the foundations for this already. So I'd like for your unconscious mind to select that hand that can really have a hand in change now. Because your unconscious mind can begin to lift that hand. Only as slowly and as comfortably as your unconscious mind can begin to learn something of great importance. And that learning is about all the ways in which happiness can be applied to that jaw. Because there's the cheap kind of happiness out there. And then there's that which comes from you. That's right, very good.
As you'll see, starting at this point and continuing on, the unconscious mind got the meaning of my communication with the gentle tap earlier, and the same hand is going to begin to lift. So we start this segment with some very broad Ericksonian suggestions around learning. The main purpose for that is to pre-frame what's about to happen next, and also when you suggest that the unconscious mind is learning something and is outside of conscious awareness, once again you pique curiosity. And curiosity is going to really be beneficial, not just within this session, but throughout life. If you were to think about it, if you were in a situation that in the past you found difficult or you weren't happy in, but this time you're deeply curious, wouldn't you automatically be more resourceful? So I'm indirectly, once again, creating curiosity about the experience. Now, I also, as I'm giving these suggestions, as I distinguish, once again, the difference between cheap happiness versus the happiness that comes from within, it wasn't picked up on the camera so well, but there were some shifts in the breathing, and if I remember correctly, there was a twitch in the hand. So that's what I was commenting on. Anytime you see a client respond in a way that's indicative of trance, of transformation, of following suggestions, whether they're direct or indirect, always reaffirm it with "that's right" or "thank you," "very good." Any of these types of responses, the unconscious mind really likes. So when you give them, you're reinforcing whatever they're doing so that they'll do more of it. You're also increasing response potential for future suggestions. So take every opportunity you can to thank your client's unconscious mind, because you will be increasing that response potential. And this is also another indirect suggestion, this time around gratitude. If you're thanking the client's unconscious mind and the unconscious mind is responding by doing more of what's good, wonder what will happen for the client if they start thanking their unconscious mind. I wonder how the unconscious mind will respond then. So take every opportunity you can to reaffirm the experiences that your client is having.
Because as that hand lifts, all on its own, I'd like for your unconscious mind to really know that while in the past, that part of you thought that the best way of managing the stress was to clench the jaw. Because as that hand's doing that, I'd like for you to consciously thank that part of you. Thank your unconscious mind for doing the best you could in that situation. And I can't stress this enough, that your unconscious mind wants what's good for you. And at some point it learned that clenching the jaw was the right thing. But that can be left aside, replaced by a new learning.
So here we are directly addressing the idea of thanking the unconscious mind. When we talk about gratitude towards the unconscious mind, and also the reframe that the unconscious mind makes the best choice available. The unconscious mind clenched the jaw because in the past, that part of him felt like that this was the most reasonable solution to the emotional issue going on. The reason why we offer this reframe is that whenever we have this type of problem where there's a behavior that the client is doing unconsciously that they'd like to stop, this is a parts conflict. The client has very much so built a wall around the part of them engaging with the behavior. The moment that they decide that the behavior is bad, that the behavior is not useful, a wall is built around that part. The client rejects that part of themselves. In order to create change, in order to reframe that part and to find more useful solutions, the client has to accept that part of them, has to integrate that part of them. If you think about this on a neurological level, this is the idea that the part of them that has been engaging in the jaw clenching, you can think of that as a neural network. There's some neural network in their brain that's in charge of clenching the jaw when they're sleeping. And when the client decides that that's bad, they're no longer directing resources, no longer directing resourceful neural networks in the direction of that part of that problematic network. So if you think of Hebb's law, neurons that fire together wire together, what's happening here is the client's taking away the opportunity for the problematic network to fire at the same time as a totally resourceful network. He's creating a wall or blocking off resources. So we want to get rid of that wall. We want to get both the problematic and the resourceful networks firing at the same time and connecting up so that the resourceful network takes over. Gratitude is a great way to do this. Reframes around the unconscious mind makes the best decision available, is looking out for the person, the unconscious mind wants what's best. Any of these types of reframes are really helpful, and you have to calibrate your client as you offer them. Once again, this is a little bit of a superficial scenario because this is a class setting. This client is totally on board for the idea that your unconscious mind is completely resourceful and can change quickly. With clients one-on-one, I'm going to bring up these reframes within the pre-talk because I want to calibrate outside of trance. How does the client respond? Do they accept it and have a moment of, oh, I haven't thought of it that way? Or do they reject it and say, no, that part's bad, that part's bad? If the client continues to reject that part, we need to do some change around that first. Otherwise, any other piece of change work that you do is going to be problematic. It may or may not take. The quickest way to create this change is to accept that part so it can be transformed. Even here, while the client's in trance, I'm still calibrating to how he responds to those reframes. There's no massive change. He's still congruent. He's still symmetrical. So I know that we can continue on.
About happiness. Because the happiness that comes from inside you can create lasting change. Because it isn't really about the things that are happening around you. That's right. It's about something much deeper.
For those of you who might be new to catalepsy and arm levitation or maybe don't use it so often, I'd like for you to pay attention to the quality of movement in the hand on this demo. This is true unconscious movement. Conscious movement tends to be a lot smoother, a lot more purposeful, a lot more direct. Unconscious movement, unconscious responses tend to be more jerky, more up and down or left and right, and a lot slower. So when you're doing an arm levitation, you're looking for the unconscious mind to be the one guiding the hand, not having the conscious mind do it. Because especially if a client is really compliant, they may consciously try to do it first, and that's not what we're looking for. We want to have the communication with the unconscious mind. The conversation that I'm having right now with this client is really between me, my unconscious mind, and what's happening in his physiology, what's happening in his body. The conscious mind has no business trying to solve a problem that is existing at the unconscious level. That's where we have to go. So if you have an overly compliant client, it can make things more tricky because they will consciously want to follow suggestions so much that when they consciously do it, it actually interferes with the process. So really sharpen those calibration skills to be tracking when you're having direct unconscious communication and when there might be some conscious interference happening. When there's conscious interference happening, there's lots of things you can do. You can slow down the process. You can change what you're doing to elicit catalepsy or arm levitation, or you can do something completely different. You can use confusional language patterns. You can use attention shifting coaching, anything to depotentiate conscious involvement.
Much more important. Because you're on a path of discovering you, who you are. And your unconscious mind can know and can remember, and I mean really remember, that you are the reservoir of happiness in your own life. And it can also know that the easiest way to relax the jaw is just to relax your tongue. And the more you generate happiness from within, the more that jaw relaxes.
Because we're working on a behavior change here, I also wanted to give a very simple, easy behavioral strategy to create the change as well. So we're relying both on what's happening at the unconscious level, but we also want to give both the unconscious and the conscious mind a route towards relaxing the jaw. And for some people, understanding how to relax the jaw might not be so clear, and really the quickest way to do it is to relax your tongue. It will create relaxation in the jaw as a response. So this is about creating more options for the conscious mind and the unconscious mind.
And why settle for cheap happiness? Environments come and go, but you always have you and your inner landscape. Because as that hand continues to lift, I'd like for your unconscious mind to go ahead and find that specific positive intention behind the jaw clenching. And you may consciously have an idea of what it might be. I know I certainly do. But it might not be that. And your unconscious mind need not make your conscious mind aware of what that is. It can keep it on the unconscious level. That's right.
So once again, we're returning to the idea of a positive intention behind any behavior. And I'm asking for his unconscious mind to get in touch with that because we want to go ahead and activate it, bring it to life within his physiology, within his neurology. It's not really important to me whether or not the conscious mind knows what it is. In fact, a lot of times it's easier if the unconscious mind keeps it secret, because then it minimalizes conscious interference and the conscious mind trying to solve the problem. So we're using the hand levitation as the external marker that the positive intention has been found. There are other approaches to doing this. If you're doing a traditional 6-step reframe, which this is a version of a 6-step reframe, then you may ask the client what the positive intention is. It really depends on the client, the piece of change work, and what's happening in your office at that time. Really, either way is better. It's up to your personal preference. This tends to be the way that I like to work when using this specific approach. And the point of the hand levitation for this is twofold. Initially, it's a really nice convincer, but really it's because I want a visual. I want to be able to see externally that he's going through the process and his unconscious mind is doing each step.
And when your unconscious mind is really in touch with that positive intention, that reason behind, that good reason behind what was happening before with the jaw, your unconscious mind can just go ahead and give me a signal. That's right, thank you.
When using this technique, you have lots of options. Sometimes I'll suggest to the client that when the positive intention is found, that hand will stop moving. Here I kept it more open-ended, and I indirectly suggested a response in one of the fingers, and I did get a twitch in that knuckle, which was pretty much what I was calibrating for. It really doesn't matter what you choose, as long as there is a set indicator that is unconscious to let you know that that piece of the work is done before you move on to the next.
And you might consciously be wondering, what just happened there? What is she talking about? Who knows? But your unconscious mind. Now,
I take a moment here to talk about the idea of the conscious maybe not knowing what happened. And I do this for a number of reasons. The first is that I'd like to create some more conscious-unconscious dissociation, the idea that the unconscious can do things outside of conscious awareness. After all, I have been, to this point, doing that to create the problem, and we're going to utilize that same strategy to create the solution. The unconscious mind can act outside of conscious awareness. The next reason is I'd like to, as a part of that conscious-unconscious dissociation, create a level of curiosity and possibly confusion at the conscious level. This is once again to depotentiate any conscious interference. And finally, I'm doing this as a pace because I don't know, because this is more of a downtime trance. He could be thinking these thoughts, and what we don't want to happen is I'm saying that's right to something that he might not be consciously aware of, and I don't want him to jump to the conclusion that because he's not consciously aware of it, nothing must have happened, because that could unravel a whole big piece of this change work. So it's really as a pace, it's to create some conscious confusion / curiosity, and also to continue on the idea of the conscious-unconscious dissociation.
because that hand can continue to lift, and now I'd like for your unconscious mind to begin to go through all of your life experiences, all those moments of happiness that come from within you. And I mean it, none of that cheap happiness. We want the real deal. because you're learning about the real you. And it can go through memories and dreams, dreams from the past, memories from the future, and find all those instances of you being genuinely you, having happened.
So here I purposely confuse the timeline, dreams from the past, memories of the future, because I want to imply that he can go anywhere to find resources. It doesn't matter if it actually happened in the external world, it's any and all representations he has internally that will be useful for this change. I also want this to be more of a pattern interrupt, so it creates, once again, a bit more conscious confusion.
And at the same time, if there's anything else that's needed, any other state, any other emotion that's needed, that's right. To meet that positive intention, your unconscious mind can go ahead and find those resources inside you. Because you are really learning right now, on a deep level, reestablishing that rapport. Because before...
So here we have very simple process instructions about finding emotions, resources that are going to satisfy that positive intention. In a traditional 6-step reframe, it's typically asked that the unconscious mind or the creative part of the client generate any number of potential behaviors to satisfy the positive intention. But I'm not really happy to just stop at behaviors because we know states drive behaviors. So I'm going to invite his unconscious mind to really find any internal resource that's needed in order to create this change. The last part here I talk about reestablishing rapport. Milton Erickson used to say that the cause of any problem that a client comes in with, in fact, the only cause of any problem that you will ever see, is a loss of rapport between the conscious and the unconscious mind. Somewhere along the way, the communication has broken down. Either the conscious mind wants the unconscious mind to stop doing or feeling something, or the unconscious mind wants to do or feel something because that part of the client believes that it's important or useful. Either way, the conscious and the unconscious aren't in sync. They're not openly communicating. If you reestablish that rapport, you reestablish that internal congruence and symmetry, then problems tend to disappear because the client is able to solve them using both parts of themselves. Our job as hypnotists, as coaches, our number one job, our number one priority is to reestablish that rapport between the client's conscious mind and unconscious mind. And when we do that, we give them a skill for life. Because for most of our clients, they'll come in not even understanding that they have an unconscious mind, or if they do know that, what that actually means. So we help them to reestablish that connection, and we primarily do it by having rapport with our own unconscious minds so that we can model for them, and having rapport with their unconscious mind. So we can model the types of internal representations and relationship to have with oneself.
When you would sleep at night and wake up with that sensation in the jaw, your unconscious mind was talking to you. Your unconscious mind was asking you, pleading with you to find that inner happiness, the smile on your face. There you go, that's right. And as that continues to happen now, you can consciously thank your unconscious mind for everything that it's done. And as this is continuing, I'm going to talk out with the audience for a moment, and this process can continue. Sarah, I'm going to give her some card. That's right. It said hands lifting and lifting. And whatever resources you need, as the outside sounds can fade into the background, it's like when you are happy. Wonder what it's like when you really feel that in your body. So as your unconscious mind does this, I'm going to ask your conscious mind. When you are happy, where do you feel it? There you go.
My chest.
Your chest.
So right here, I again make a distinction between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind can do what's happening in the hand while I speak with the client's conscious mind. And in all reality, that's a bit of a metaphor, because what I'm asking him to do next is an unconscious process. I'm asking him to bring that state to life that he's looking for. So I'm doing a very direct state elicitation, a resource state elicitation here within the trance. And as I begin the process, as I get him in touch with what that resource state is like in his body, his unconscious mind responds very quickly, well before he does. You can hear it in the change in his breathing, the expression on his face, the shift. So he's starting to access a state, and it's well before he can give words to it. The reason why I'm doing this has to do with how I typically coach, because I tend to do a lot more uptime coaching and state elicitation. And trance in itself is a really powerful dissociation. Meaning it's really useful in dissociating from negative states. And we also want to link up resource states to contexts, to behaviors, to outcomes, whatever the change work is that we're doing. So in this case, I want to elicit a resource state so it links up with that positive intention. The quickest way to elicit a state is to go through the physiology. Sure, you can do things like a revivification, tell me about the last time and place you really felt happy, but in my experience, it's easier and quicker to ask the client what it's like in their body, because it forces them almost into whatever context in the past they would have had that experience. And as soon as they can say what it's like in the body, then you know at some level that they have to be feeling at least some of it to be able to even tell you where it is and what it's like.
That's right. And that can continue to grow in your chest. And I don't know if it, as your unconscious mind is making changes. Once your unconscious mind has gathered all of the resources it needs, that hand will become very still, and you'll begin to dream. And what you dream about, I don't know. Some people dream in pictures, and other people dream in sounds. Some people dream in physical experience. But this dream is going to teach you something.
Dreams are really important in terms of human psychology and neurology. Dreams hold two functions at night when we sleep. The first type of dream we have every night is the dream that allows us to integrate the experiences and the things that we've learned throughout the day. The second type of dream we have every night is the dream that allows us to manage emotional difficulties, make personal change, and so on. So dreams are really powerful and very important to our well-being. In this particular technique, in this dreaming arm, the reason why we're using dreams is first as a mechanism for integration of all the resources that he's found in order to satisfy that positive intention, to offer the unconscious mind the opportunity to try those on and test it out in the dream world to make sure it works. And then at the conscious level, a dream serves as a convincer that something unusual is happening, as if arm levitation isn't unusual enough. I also mentioned the different types of dreams he can have, whether it's visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and this is really for the conscious mind covering all bases. I'm pretty much saying it doesn't matter what experience you have. It doesn't matter if it's not a dream in the traditional sense. The suggestion is that it still counts. It's still working. The suggestion of the hand coming down, this is a nice way to begin to end the trance process, and also the suggestion here is integration.
About your unconscious, thank you very much, that's right, your unconscious mind. Now. And we have all sorts of dreams when you sleep effortlessly at night. And those dreams are opportunities for you to integrate learnings. And the second set of dreams you have are about managing emotions. And when your unconscious mind manages those emotions, there's no need for them to be in your body because you have the dream landscape to work them out. And in fact, to the extent that your unconscious mind allows all of you to rest effortlessly, the more you're free to build happiness into your life. And not that cheap kind either, that real genuine happiness that starts in your chest and brings a smile. Because when your unconscious mind is ready and when that dream is finished, and only when that dream is finished, your hand is going to begin to drift down. And as it does, your unconscious mind is going to go ahead and place those resources, those emotions, those skills, where they need to be in order for you to be fully relaxed, effortless as you sleep at night. That's right.
This is returning to the idea that we talked about at the beginning of this clip around the ecology of making this change and the importance that the jaw may have played in the past in alerting the client that there are changes that need to take place. So I don't want to take away the strategy, because the strategy in and of itself is good to have some sort of physiological indicator that he can pay attention to that it's time to make a change. It just happens to be that the jaw clenching isn't the most resourceful way to do it. So I'm going to invite him to find another way to do it, to get that message across.
Because it is effortless as you sleep at night. That's right. And you can be happy in the knowledge that change is taking place. And in the past, that jaw sensation, that's right, was an indication from your unconscious mind to pay attention. But I would like to invite your unconscious mind to find a more happy, more effortless way to grab your attention.
Whether or not that was his unconscious mind's positive intention, I don't know, but I do know for this client, having known him for some time at this point, that it was useful in terms of how it was alerting him. So I wanted to give more options, so I treated it as the positive intention in terms of a traditional 6-step where I'm asking for a new behavior instead.
Perhaps a smile. But for now, you can rest even more deeply. In fact, I'm going to invite you to deepen this trance even more, knowing that as you go even deeper inside, the sound of my voice will go with you. That's right. And it may take the form of someone in a dream, a friend, a colleague, or it could just be like the wind as you drift even deeper now, allowing those changes to set into place. Because I'd like for your unconscious mind to create inside of you, that's right, a state close to sleep, knowing that you're stable and supported in this chair.
Anytime you're working with a sleep-related issue, whether it's jaw clenching or sleepwalking or negative dreams that the client would like to change, any of these types of sleep behaviors, at some point in the session, create as close to the physiological environment where the problem occurred previously so that the client can test out the new behavior and new strategy. You can think of this as a part of a future pace or a part of the testing phase of a session. So we want to mimic sleep as closely as possible, so this is also giving the client the opportunity to practice. So if they can do it here, then they can do it at night when they sleep. So that's the purpose of deepening the trance here, and of course, if you want, you can be as direct as you'd like. The deeper the trance, the less indirect you need to be. And in the case of this particular change work piece, because I wanted to demo the dreaming arm first, I went with this second, which is actually kind of nice because the client is used to a medium level of trance, a light level of trance, and now it's going to be very easy after he's spent some time in the medium level trance to move into a much deeper trance state, a more associated trance state. So I don't have to do anything fancy. I don't have to use any overly complex Ericksonian language. I can be as direct as I like to. I still tend to be a bit more indirect, so that comes through in my language patterns, but just know that the deeper the trance, the more direct you can be.
Because as that happens, it's time for your unconscious mind to practice having that happiness in the jaw. That's right. Because there might be things that are stressful in the outside world, things at work, reports to file, people to deal with. And yet, things can be happy on the inside and effortless. Because you know you're making a change. You know you're changing your life, moving in a new direction. So knowing that you're moving in a new direction, you really ought to take the time to enjoy the journey. And that's it. There you go. Your unconscious mind can now know and really understand that that part of you can resolve emotions in more resourceful ways when you dream at night, when you wake up feeling so much better, refreshed.
So once again, this is the idea of installing a more resourceful strategy in order to manage emotional states. And instead of using the jaw to manage stress, now he can use his dreams, the thing that dreams are meant for, working through emotions.
And I don't know just how you're going to send that happiness to your jaw, but I do know if you're going to send it to your jaw, you may as well send it to all of you. Each and every part of the whole of you. Because as this happens now, and as you really deeply pay attention to the things that are the most important for you, you can rest comfortably at night. In fact, you will rest effortlessly because the rest is happy.
Here I'm just playing with some ambiguous language. Is it the rest meaning the rest at night when he sleeps, or is it the rest meaning the rest of experience, the rest of him, the sum total of who he is? It's ambiguous, and the unconscious mind likes those types of ambiguities, and it doesn't really matter which way he takes it. The suggestion is still the same and still positive.
Easy. Like a smile. You don't have to think about smiling, it just happens. And your unconscious mind now can really continue this change. Because tonight, you'll go to sleep and you'll dream. And I don't know what kind of dreams you'll have. You might have exciting ones or boring ones. You might have technicolor ones or black and white dreams. But whatever dreams you have, that's it. Thank you. Right, unconscious mind. Whatever dreams you have, those dreams can be a way of creating happiness in all of you, the entire whole, in your life. That genuine happiness. A happiness that allows you to move forward, that keeps you aware. Which means that the best way for you to make change in your life is to really relax the things that aren't really needed to hold on to anymore. Because now you're really learning about your unconscious. And your unconscious mind can go through and make any other changes it needs to support this. Because tonight, as you sleep, and the next night, and the night after that, and the week after that, and the month after that, your jaw will relax.
We know through Hebb's law and the idea of long-term potentiation that any piece of change work isn't complete until the client goes home, sleeps, dreams, and wakes up the next day. This is time for the client's neurology to integrate the change and to also get those networks more sensitive to each other and more linked up. So I often will give suggestions for the integration to continue while the client sleeps and dreams. And as I was going through this and giving the different options for the types of dreams he has, I get a nice unconscious head nod, so I know that on a deep level, the unconscious mind has understood the meaning behind the communication.
Because your jaw can relax comfortably. Because you know that when it's time to sleep, the outside world, the environment on the outside, the cheap states, aren't really important. Only the emotions that come from inside of you are the most important. Now, because you are very comfortably in trance, I am going to suggest your jaw will relax. You'll be at the right state for comfortable sleep from here on out. And if there are other things your unconscious mind needs to change, it can use your dreams to do this. It can use your sleep and your rest to do it, knowing that the rest of you, outside of the unconscious mind, doesn't need to be involved. Because the conscious mind need not be made aware of what the unconscious mind is doing. And up to now, the conscious mind's been pretty aware about the sensations. That's over. You're done. But for now, I'm going to invite you very slowly and comfortably to become more aware of the feelings in your hands and your feet, your arms and your legs, knowing that you are an awesome hypnotic subject, by the way. And you can become more aware of the room around you, the sounds around you, sharing this space with the class. That's right, stretching a little bit, allowing positive change to fully integrate.
So here's a nice future pace and a very direct suggestion. The client at this point is deeply in hypnosis, and so in the right state for very direct suggestion.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
You did a really good job.
Thanks.
How are you feeling right now?
Relaxed.
Relaxed. So think about like one of those things that, made you feel stressed, like that report last week. How are you feeling now?
Not as bad about it.
Not as bad about it. What's happening with the jaw?
It's relaxed.
Oh,
That dropped.
that's right. And that can continue. To the extent that you're still aware that you are making important life changes. And it is a propulsion system. Sometimes you need to know about the cheap environment states so that you can move forward. But they're just cheap. They don't matter.
One of the most resourceful beliefs as hypnotists that we can help instill in our clients is that they are fantastic hypnotees, hypnotic subjects, whatever you'd like to call them, because this then sets a foundation that anytime in the future they'd like to go into hypnosis or create any type of positive change through hypnosis, it will be easy because they're skilled at this. Hypnosis is a skill. And so we're congratulating the client for being gifted at it, and we are setting them up for future success using it as a tool. Remember that when a client comes out of trance, they are still in trance. They're still in that afterglow of hypnosis. So it's a great time to give lots of positive suggestions that will slip past the conscious radar. And so I'm taking this opportunity to drive home again the difference between his cheap states versus the states that he generates. And I also want to remind him, once again, that those cheap states are still useful because it can serve as an away from to let him know that it's still time to make some important life changes.
It's the ones that come from you that do. So pleasant dreams tonight.
Thank you.
Great job.
If this were a full one-on-one session, we would spend a lot more time with the pre-frames and pre-talk, and also a lot more time with the testing and conditioning. This was more within the framework of a short demo, so I had to be cognizant of the time and what was happening in the room with the other students. So you could definitely add more into this, spend more time testing at the end, but this should give you a really nice idea of how to work with something like teeth grinding with an Ericksonian or Neo-Ericksonian approach. If you'd like to discover more, visit us at theintelligenthypnotist.com. Thanks so much.